A wealthy businessman sneered at a royal guard's uniform, mocking the man for standing still like a statue. Yet behind the guard's silence lay centuries of devotion and the legacy of those who served before him. But before we continue, let us know in the comments, have you ever witnessed a moment where dignity triumphed over arrogance? And if you believe respect is earned through actions, not wealth, hit subscribe so you never miss a story like this. The palace courtyard was awash in sunlight as visitors gathered with curiosity and reverence, many coming to see the disciplined display of the royal guards. At the center stood Henry Blake, a man whose posture was a testament to years of training, commitment, and silent pride. Day after day, Henry assumed his post, unperturbed by sweltering heat or driving rain. Today was no different. Yet, when Charles Whitmore, an infamous millionaire with a hunger for attention, swaggered into the courtyard, the stage was set for a clash of values. Henry was no stranger to curious onlookers and occasional teasing. He had grown accustomed to camera flashes, children's innocent giggles, and even the occasional adult who tried to make him laugh. These playful disruptions were typically harmless, and Henry took them in stride. This new arrival, however, carried an aura of entitlement. Charles and his entourage made a point of pushing their way to the front of the crowd, demanding the best view. Henry, gaze fixed forward, felt the shift in the atmosphere. Charles's braying laughter cut through the reverent hush, a sure sign he had no intention of simply passing by. Instead of admiring the centuries-old tradition, Charles was prepared to turn it into his personal spectacle. Henry's uniform was pristine, a polished testament to the proud history of those who stood their ground in wars large and small. Dark cloth contrasted with shining buttons, each carefully placed, symbolizing years of heritage. On his chest, several medals winked in the sunlight, each bearing silent witness to the sacrifices of men and women who wore uniforms like this one to defend king, country, and the freedoms that millions take for granted. Charles, brandishing a gold-plated lighter and an imported cigar, made an offhand remark to his entourage. "Look at this poor statue. Must be a real cushy job, standing around all day." The few sycophants who clung to his side tittered in agreement, though their laughter was tinged with unease. The guards' unbroken composure felt almost supernatural. The crowd around them had begun to sense a drama unfolding. Parents guided their children closer, though quietly reminded them to show respect. A handful of war veterans, there to pay tribute to old memories, watched Charles with thinly veiled disgust. They knew the uniform Henry wore signified more than a tourist attraction. Charles's first attempt to provoke Henry was relatively minor. He circled around, snapping his fingers as if testing whether the guard was truly conscious. Children giggled nervously, but Henry remained statuesque. Emboldened, Charles struck theatrical poses for selfies, standing shoulder to shoulder with Henry, leaning in close to inspect his uniform and making exaggerated faces. The flash of cameras captured the surreal tableau, the well-groomed guard, with a stern expression contrasted by a smirking, self-assured socialite. A few in the audience found it entertaining, while others shifted uncomfortably, uncertain whether to intervene or simply watch. Charles thrived on the attention. Despite his ostentatious wealth, something deep within him craved validation, the kind that money alone could not secure. In humiliating the guard, he believed he could seize a moment that would elevate his social media presence. After all, was it not amusing to break the guard's seemingly unbreakable discipline? Henry had faced his share of petty mockery during ceremonial duty before. Usually he brushed it off, secure in his understanding that the guard's code forbade visible reactions. Yet Charles's smugness gnawed at him. Something about the man's brazen disregard for tradition and the obvious relish in humiliating another lit a small spark of outrage deep within Henry's disciplined mind. Decades of experience in the military taught him that discipline did not mean weakness. It meant controlling when and how you respond. If this man crossed a certain line, Henry knew his duty would shift from stoic silence to measured action. Charles's entourage offered scattered encouragement as he took photos, urged to push the joke further for the sake of an online post that would surely go viral. Some tourists, captivated by the drama, held up their phones, filming the unfolding scene. Others, however, recognized the tension. A hush settled over the courtyard whenever Charles moved in too close. With each disrespectful gesture, onlookers felt the weight of the guard's dignity challenged. Many hoped Henry might demonstrate the resilience for which ceremonial guards were famous, either by ignoring the taunts or delivering a firm rebuke. Yet the formal regulations often left guards with a narrow margin for response. Sensing no immediate retaliation, Charles moved on to more physical attempts at provocation. He softly batted at Henry's collar as if removing imaginary dust. He pulled at the corner of the guard's medal ribbons, feigning curiosity about their significance, while offering sly winks to his friends. The guard's chest rose and fell, but no words escaped him. Charles, interpreting this silence as submission, flicked open his gold lighter, lit a fresh cigar, and eyed Henry up and down. For a moment it appeared as though he would blow smoke right into Henry's face. Instead, he exhaled slowly into the open air, letting the smoke drift. He waited, watching for any hint of reaction. Henry's eyes were steel, his posture a stone sentinel. Then came the moment that made the crowd gasp. Ash drifted from Charles's cigar onto the meticulously kept uniform. It was a bold, deliberate statement of disrespect. Charles actually grinned as it happened, as if proud of himself for crossing a line. A teenager in the crowd murmured, "That's not right." A mother covered her child's eyes. There was a collective hush. Henry inhaled, feeling the press of training and tradition. For years he had served in actual combat, seen the worst of humanity. He had lost friends, carried them home in flags, and donned this ceremonial uniform to commemorate the fallen. Every medal pinned over his heart represented a different story of valor and sacrifice. He recalled the adrenaline of the battlefield, the ripping sound of gunfire, the final moments of comrades who clutched each other's hands as the light in their eyes faded. That memory alone steadied him, reminding him why he stood guard here: to honor the living and the dead, to preserve history, and to remind the public that behind every uniform is a real human story. Charles's smug face blurred into the background of Henry's memory, replaced by images of devout loyalty and unwavering service. When Henry finally spoke, it was as if the entire courtyard exhaled in relief. His voice, subdued yet resounding, cut through the tension. "Sir, you may flick ash at me, insult me, or belittle me all you want, but know this: the uniform you treat so lightly was forged by the sacrifices of those who had far less than you, but chose to give everything for this land." All cameras turned toward them. A hush fell, so profound that people on the periphery leaned in, straining to hear every syllable. Henry continued, describing how each medal on his chest was not just a piece of metal, but a story. He recounted losing a friend in a conflict overseas, a man who had lived for others, who saw service not as a chore, but as a sacred honor. That friend's name was embroidered on the inside of the uniform. Henry carried him everywhere, a silent guardian, close to his heart. Charles's cocky posture faltered. The smirk dissolved, replaced by a look of confusion and unease. He had expected an angry outburst, maybe a shove or harsh words he could sneer at. What he received instead was a reasoned, deeply human reflection that transformed the uniform from a mere costume into a symbol of genuine sacrifice. The crowd listened, rapt. A few older veterans in the back saluted discreetly, tears in their eyes. Parents crouched down to whisper to their children about respect. Some recorded every moment, intending to share it with the world. Charles was at a crossroads. Either he could escalate the situation, or he could retreat and avoid further disgrace. His face reddened as he sensed the tide of public opinion turning sharply against him. His entourage, moments ago cheerleaders to his theatrics, now stepped away, clearly unwilling to associate with him in this moment of ignominy. The hush broke with scattered applause that quickly spread. Embarrassed and cornered, Charles tried to mutter an apology, his voice stumbling on pride and regret. The apology was barely coherent, overshadowed by the sense that a more profound restitution was required, one that no words alone could achieve. In that instant, the power dynamic flipped. It was not the millionaire towering over the silent guard, but the guard, composed and honorable, standing unwavering while Charles faced the court of public opinion. With heads turned, cameras rolling, and hush replaced by murmurs of sympathy and respect for the guard, Charles felt an unfamiliar vulnerability. His wealth meant nothing here, in the face of true dignity. Within a few hours, the incident was on social media. The videos spread like wildfire, each clip captioned with some variation of wealth versus honor, disrespect meets discipline, or when silence speaks louder than money. Thus, people worldwide saw how the ceremonial guard, long perceived as merely ornamental, revealed a depth of humanity and humility that no amount of fortune could overshadow. Charles tried to post a public apology on his social media accounts, praising soldiers and celebrating the guard's stoicism. Yet the damage was done. Reactions poured in, many condemning him, others urging him to donate to veterans' charities to show genuine remorse. His brand and reputation took a hit that could not be easily mended by PR statements or orchestrated photo ops. Meanwhile, Henry continued performing his duties, returning the very next day to stand at his post, as he always did. The difference was that a new respect tinged the gazes of onlookers. People sought him out, not just as a tourist attraction, but as a figure worthy of admiration and gratitude. War veterans who came to watch the ceremonial changing of the guard felt a special kinship, seeing in Henry a reflection of themselves. The story took on a life of its own. In schools, teachers played the viral video to illustrate that status and discipline are not about how much money one has, but how one conducts oneself in moments of confrontation. In community forums, people praised Henry for his restraint, contrasting it with the arrogance displayed by Charles. Even those who had never given a second thought to ceremonial guards found themselves thinking about the silent sacrifices underlying every crisp salute. Meanwhile, Charles went through a period of public contrition. His peers avoided his social gatherings, and business partners quietly distanced themselves. His name became synonymous with arrogance and entitlement in online discourse. Bloggers and columnists used him as an example of what happens when someone underestimates the power of quiet integrity. Over time, some portion of the population forgave him, but the sting remained, fueled by the permanence of the internet. The courtyard returned to normal routines. Tourists bustled in daily, snapping pictures of the architecture, the flags, the ceremonial rituals. Henry, as always, remained motionless, his feet planted precisely, his hands resting on his rifle. The medals on his chest gleamed under the sun, now recognized as markers of real stories, real people, and real sacrifice. A subtle shift marked the crowd's attitude. People watched with deeper respect and curiosity, mindful that behind the uniform was a story they didn't fully know. Sometimes children would approach, offering small waves or salutes, and Henry would blink in acknowledgement or offer the slightest nod when protocol allowed. In those tiny interactions, a profound lesson about service and respect resonated. The next time Charles visited, if he ever dared, he would not find a guard easily made into a spectacle. Instead, he would encounter a living monument to the values that forged the country he took for granted. Henry's measured response had won the day. No punches thrown, no insults hurled, just a calm unveiling of truth. That honor cannot be purchased. That discipline is not the absence of feeling, but the mastery of it, and that those who stand guard do so not for applause, but for duty. The crowd, the world, and even Charles himself learned an indelible lesson. True dignity arises when one chooses restraint over revenge, compassion over humiliation, and knowledge over ignorance. As people left comments on the viral video, many of them shared personal anecdotes, memories of family members who served in the military, or times they witnessed someone stand up for respect in a seemingly small but transformative way. Even those who had once teased ceremonial guards for their unflinching posture came to see that such discipline speaks volumes about human resilience. The next day, Henry took up his post again. Foot traffic ebbed and flowed in the courtyard. Cameras clicked, and voices buzzed in dozens of languages. The guard was as still and disciplined as ever. Yet for those who lingered, who recognized him from the video, he was so much more than a silent figure. He was a bridge between the past and the present, a testament to the notion that tradition and discipline endure for a reason. A small child, hoisted on her father's shoulders, offered Henry a respectful salute, tiny palm pressed to her forehead in clumsy reverence. Henry didn't smile. Regulations wouldn't permit it. But a warmth flickered in his gaze, acknowledging her gesture. Behind him, centuries of palace history loomed, and in front of him, a new generation witnessing what quiet strength can achieve. True strength, as Henry exemplified, does not always roar. Sometimes it stands silent until challenged, then speaks gently but firmly of truths that cannot be brushed aside. A single moment of calm clarity in response to provocation can reverberate far beyond the immediate scene, stirring hearts and reshaping public opinion. In this instance, Henry's composed words revealed something universal. No matter how much wealth or status one accumulates, respect must be earned through humility, empathy, and real understanding of the institutions and people who protect us all. When Charles walked away, still enveloped in shame, the guard resumed his post with unwavering resolve, reaffirming for all present that real power is often found in service and self-control rather than grandstanding or cruelty. Days later, stories abounded on social media from families who had visited the palace just to see Henry. They used the trip as a teaching moment for their children. "This is the guard you saw in that video. Notice how he stands so still. That's discipline. Notice how he doesn't respond to insults with anger. That's dignity." War veterans who had never met Henry felt a surge of pride, seeing him as a successor to the same ideals they had once carried into battle. Even staff at the palace recognized a shift in how tourists approached the guards, more politely, with a sense of awe that transcended the usual spectacle. In the grand scheme of the city's bustling life, the guards' day-to-day role continued, unaffected. Ceremonies were conducted, flags were raised, and tours were given. But an undercurrent of awareness coursed through the community. People remembered that the guards were not ornamental mannequins. They were individuals upholding a sacred trust. What Charles had intended as a fun little power trip turned into a major turning point, an exposé of his own insecurities, and a broader lesson about how we treat those we perceive as silent or subordinate. The memory of Henry's words and Charles's humiliation endured, a touchstone for conversations about the real meaning of respect and service. Perhaps in the quiet hours of reflection, Charles himself pondered how easily he had been undone by a single measured response. Meanwhile, Henry remained steadfast, a living testament to the moral that had been laid bare. Dignity upheld in the face of arrogance speaks louder than any insult could, and to uphold that dignity requires immense internal strength, one forged, not by ego, but by a lifetime of principle. In the wider world, the video continued circulating, accumulating millions of views. The reaction threads featured everything from expressions of outrage at Charles's behavior to heartfelt tributes to Henry and all servicemen and servicewomen who display valor without asking for applause. Stories about unsung heroes began to emerge. People wanted to share their own experiences of meeting individuals like Henry, quiet guardians whose daily labor goes unnoticed until someone attempts to degrade the uniform or the person wearing it. The widespread dialogue touched on deeper themes, prompting discussions about how modern society sometimes overlooks the structures that ensure safety, order, and continuity. Charles tried to salvage his public image by donating a large sum to charities supporting veterans. It was a nice gesture, but many saw it as damage control. Some accepted it as a small redemption, acknowledging that at least something positive came from his disgrace. Others felt it was too little, too late. Regardless, Charles' name remained entwined with the memory of the confrontation, a cautionary tale warning that wealth does not exempt one from accountability. And so, a bizarre moment in a palace courtyard became a moral phenomenon. The guard, who never sought fame, became an international symbol of composure. The millionaire, who hungered for attention, got the kind of spotlight no one would covet. The difference between them: one served a higher calling, while the other served only his own vanity. A week after the incident, the courtyard looked much the same. Tourists streaming in, cameras flashing, the architecture gleaming in the sun. Henry stood motionless. On the surface, little had changed. But in the hearts of those who recognized him, who had seen the viral clip, there was a stirring of admiration that manifested in more respectful distance, gentler voices and genuine smiles. The city's tourism offices even noticed a spike in visitors, specifically mentioning the guard from the video. Families approached with caution and reverence, hoping for just a glimpse of the man who taught an unexpected lesson. Some would place a hand over their heart as they passed, silently saying thanks. Others would nod respectfully, wordlessly connecting with the guard's unwavering presence. Henry, for his part, did not let the attention shift his focus or break his stoic resolve. He carried on as he always had, because this was his calling. He might acknowledge a wave or a salute with a subtle motion, but never more. Perhaps the most profound change was internal. Henry had always believed in what the uniform represented, but now he felt the global echoes of that belief. The outpouring of support affirmed that decency still resonated with people. Respect wasn't outdated. It was a universal language that transcended borders and backgrounds. And in that sense, Henry's quiet stance, day after day, took on new significance, not just for him, but for the crowds that gathered, and for those online who followed his story. By returning to his post, unaffected in demeanor but profoundly validated in spirit, Henry completed the arc of this moral tale. Show the world that steadfast commitment to principle outweighs fleeting shows of wealth and power. Eventually, Charles fell out of the news cycle, replaced by other stories. But for those who witnessed or learned of the courtyard confrontation, the lesson endured. Even if one forgot the names, the image of a man in uniform standing calmly, ash on his shoulder, speaking not with hostility but with unwavering conviction, lingered like a well-placed moral signpost. It whispered that each of us might one day face a moment where we could respond to provocation with fury or with dignity, and that choice would echo, not just in the moment, but far beyond. Henry's final words to Charles, delivered with patient Sincerity rang on in the memory of all who heard them or watched the video. That is how legends are born, not by loud gestures or violent acts, but by patient souls who refuse to let others tarnish what they hold dear. Day after day, Henry would be there, a sentinel not just of stone walls and ceremony, but of a principle. The story invites each of us to consider, when tested, will we respond in kind, or will we rise above? That question is what kept the moral alive, ensuring that respect and honor remain more than abstract ideals, but living, breathing virtues anyone can embody, uniform or no uniform. Thank you for joining us in this reflection on true strength and composure. Let us continue to value the qualities that keep us connected: respect, empathy, and the courage to stand for what is right, even when it is difficult. If this story moved you, we invite you to share it with others who might need a reminder that dignity can triumph over arrogance. May we all remember that genuine respect cannot be demanded by wealth or force. It is given freely in recognition of integrity, sacrifice, and the humility to recognize our shared humanity.